All right, I see over 100 people have joined us already. We're also on time, so good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone. I have the pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar focusing on the management of phosphate fertilizers for feeding the world sustainably. This webinar has been jointly organized by the UN Environment Programme together with the Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Fertilizer Association, the IFA, under the overall framework of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, the GPNM. This is actually part of a series in the lead up to UNEP 6, so some of you may have already joined us in previous webinars, so welcome again. The webinar today essentially aims to explore sustainable phosphorus management practices that promote healthy soils and reduce nutrient loss or waste through the recovery and reuse of phosphorus. You can already see some of our presenters here having their video on, so thank you all for having joined and presenting today. My name is Sarah Iweke. I'm your moderator for today, and I work in the Source to Sea Pollution Unit at UNEP. We provide secretariat services to the GPNM and also the UNEP working group on nitrogen. So without further ado, very happy to see so many participants online already. It's really with great pleasure that I now introduce you to the Professor Ramesh Ramachandran, Director of the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India, and he is also chair of the GPNM. So I will welcome you, Ramesh, to officially open this webinar. Over to you. Ramesh, I'm not sure if you're having some trouble with your internet. Just checking if you come online. If not, I may proceed. Ramesh? Okay, no problem. I think Ramesh is having some challenges. Perhaps he can come in at the end. James Lomax, I hope, are you ready to go? If I can just introduce you already. Yes, I see you already there. Yes, so then I think we just proceed to the first presenter, our in-house presenter from UNEP, James Lomax. He's the Sustainable Food Systems and Agriculture Program Officer, and he will now be presenting on the ecological foundations of sustainable food systems. So over to you, James. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very sorry that we couldn't get the welcoming remarks from Professor Ramesh. That is a shame, but this is live TV, right? So this is what happens. So let me just bung that on. Okay, so I presume you can see me and hear me. I presume that is fine.
Yes, can you do loud that? And clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you see? Okay, let me just let me share it. Sorry about that. Okay. Great. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Nice one. Thank you so much. Well, thank you very much, colleagues. It's a huge pleasure to be here, and especially to open this fantastic webinar. I've been given the difficult, I suppose, the difficult job of opening the webinar. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to really talk about, give the context, if you like, for where we stand at UNEP and the type of work that we are doing to complement and to support the work of the GPNM and also on food systems writ large. So my name is James Lomax and I work on food systems and agriculture, and I'm based in Nairobi. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so look, we are in a terribly challenging situation when it comes to our food systems. And I think we cannot talk about, if you like, the problems that we are facing very much at the field level or at the mineral application level without understanding the context in which we're in 2024. So due to various things, whether it be climate change or conflict, food price index is at record levels. Fertilizer price, which is linked, of course, to oil and energy price, is a very, very high. And also transport costs are extremely high as well. So we've got tons of problems that are all coming together to impact the way we produce our food. And of course, we're here to talk about fertilizers. And if we talk about the next slide, fertilizer shortages are very, very real. So in the context of the crisis in Eastern Europe and Russia, we understand that Russia and Belarus account for over 20% of world exports. And these prices are very dependent on energy prices, right? So, of course, natural gas, which is so important for the ensuring that mineral fertilizer is available, has also gone up. Therefore, the price of nitrogen is very expensive. So it's not only the availability of existing supply, but it's also the capacity of production and cost of production. So all of these three things have come up. And we understand that Russia and Belarus account for over 20%. So there's a real need for us to start to think differently about how we apply nutrients and how we feed the world. So I thought I'd give a very, very brief background on where we stand in UNEP when it comes to our food systems approach writ large. And one thing that I'd like to really focus on is on the right, when we talk about where are the areas that we really want to work on. And the first one is that we really want to work with countries to systemically change how they work, and particularly how we can leverage the multilateral environmental agreements to very much create change at the country level, where commitments, we have multi-layered commitments when it comes to agriculture, and specifically the global biodiversity framework. Issues like that, commitments like that, these multi-layered commitments that are legally binding, this is where the opportunity comes in to start talking about soil health as a unifier and a cross-cutter when it comes to achieving not just the SDGs, but also our climate, biodiversity, and desertification commitments. And critically, our second constituency is how we work with decision makers to support the transformation of 30 large agri-businesses. This, I think, is critical. And when it comes to such a private sector driven sector as the fertilizer sector, this is very, very critical. So how do we achieve this? Well, we achieve this by focusing on 4 key areas. And this is where we talk about the food system cycle of change, where in the middle, it's all about the policy. So we have 4 areas. It's about the policies, it's about governance, it's about incentives, finance, but also it's about how then they can create the conditions for the uptake and the scaling, for example, of nature positive and resilient agriculture, circular food systems, and of course health. But of course, what we're talking about today is this idea of how do we bring our soils and our land into a much more sustainable, resilient, and nature positive state. So on the far sort of outer ring, we can see that there are 4 areas that we want to focus on. And if we look at the issue of soil health very much fits into at least 3 of those when it comes to the nature-based solutions part, when it comes to very much the pollution part on management of nutrients, and then, of course, when it comes to mitigation of carbon, sequestration, and GHG mitigation. All right, so this is something that looks nice, but is fairly obvious. As we know, UNEP really focuses on something called the triple planetary crisis, and our strategy, our 4-year, 8-year strategy, is based around how can we work collectively to deal with climate, nature, and chemical and pollution issues. So we feel that healthy soils, they're an entry point for this as a real unifier. And I think while the science continues to evolve, the role of soil in the triple planetary crisis is becoming clearer. And I think if we take soil restoration, for example, this provides multiple benefits for progress towards climate, nature, and of course the pollution side of things. You know, we've got this issue of this opportunity of soil organic carbon. By increasing that, we're increasing the elements for sequestration, we're reducing the demand for nutrients, which is important, and inputs, and finally restoring soil microbiology. And I mean, this is not news to you, but of course I always try to remember this. But, you know, 200 million tons of reactive nitrogen, 80% is lost to the environment, leaching into soil, rivers, and lakes, and emitted to the air. So soil health, we feel, is a real connector. It's something that will help us very much to get to where we want to get to. So soil health is the ability of the soil to sustain the productivity, diversity, environmental services of terrestrial ecosystems. Healthy soil hosts more biodiversity in 1 teaspoon than there are humans on Earth. Let's not forget about why we apply fertilizer in the first place. But soil is in a shocking state. Over 40% of the Earth's surfaces degraded, negatively affecting over 3.2 billion people. And topsoil is being lost at a massive rate of approximately 36 billion tons, and global cropland erosion at 17 billion tons. So we're at a crossroad. We need to ensure the pathway for achieving soil health addresses the critical economic, structural, and technical capacity barriers that prevent farmers and land managers from accessing finance, productive inputs, and information. And these are critical to enhance the scaling of healthy soil practices and ecosystem functioning. So healthy soils do much more than just reduce the demand for inputs, for fertilizers. Crucially, they are very important when it comes to regulating water, allowing infiltration and detention of water. This is critical, especially when it comes to resilience. Of course, it sustains life, plants, and soil organisms. One of the things that I feel quite important here is that, you know, at UNEP, one of our biggest things is to talk about biodiversity. But if we can't have biodiversity underground, how can we have it above ground? Filtering and buffering the soil particles and organisms filter, buffer, degrade, and immobilize potential pollutants. Again, massively important. The soil stores, transforms, and cycles nutrients, including carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and others. But then there's also this issue around the actual infrastructure of soil, making sure that there's enough air, there's enough soil organisms, and to really make sure that the soil is strong enough to withstand extreme weather conditions, etc. So yeah, so this is really much, I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking to lots and lots of soil scientists, but this is something that at UNEP we're very keen to pursue, as it really crosscuts our biodiversity agenda, it crosscuts our carbon agenda, it crosscuts our pollution agenda. Okay, so this is something that I'm very keen on, and And something that we mustn't forget, that while in many ways soil health is quite complex, of course it is. In fact, when we look at the principles of soil health, we actually have quite a lot of commonality, and the messaging is quite simple. So I quite like the 6 areas that the Minnesota Soil Health Coalition puts forward. And they are 6. The first one is to consider the context of your own farm when applying the soil health principles, i.e. what's doable, what's not. Second one is around soil disturbance. Of course, we understand that tillage breaks down soil aggregates and facilitates the consumption of biological glues that hold the aggregates together, which reduce the capacity to infiltrate water and store water. As somebody who used to run a tractor fleet in my previous life, I think this is one of the biggest issues we have to deal with. How do we go from a tradition of tillage to one that celebrates no tillage? This idea of protecting your soil, keep the soil covered at all times with cover crops, etc. Plant diversity, expand crop rotations and use diverse cover crop mixes. This will increase plant, insect, wildlife and biology diversity. Keep a living root. Keeping a living root in the soil as long as possible feeds the soil the biology, thus feeding our plants. Although I have examples in quite arid parts of Kenya, for example, where keeping a living root actually dries out land faster. So I think there's a little bit of discussion around that. And then the last one is about integrating livestock. And I think we've got to embrace the fact that plants and livestock have a synergistic relationship. And when livestock graze on plants, photosynthesis increases and releases root exudates that feed the biology and supply nutrients for regrowth. So I think we've got this idea that soil health will actually, if that can be encouraged, this is a positive way of minimizing erosion, minimizing the use of inputs, and increasing food security, and essentially increasing resilience. So last slide. Healthy soils is a unifying cause for addressing the triple planetary crisis. So water security, nature, inherent fertility, and erosion prevention. Food security, resilience to climate change and geopolitical shocks can be improved through improving soil health. When it comes to science, prioritizing soil health politically can help bridge ideological divides and can galvanize joined up action as countries work on achieving MEAs and SDGs. So this idea of science and policy, the combination of scientific research and policy signals, repurposing subsidies, for example, while also enhancing community engagement. Of course, how can we really work on using the huge amounts of public money that goes to supporting the agriculture sector to focusing on soil health rather than inputs. And then the last one is around scaling. So encouraging farmer and pasture-led innovations to tailor practices and incentives to meet needs is critical for scaling and for accelerating impact on the ground. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say. And I can't wait to hear from the other participants because I look forward to learning about all the work that's being done on sustainable phosphorus. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, James. And I think you've done a great job to also provide an introduction. I just spoke to Ramesh, and I think he's online now, so I will ask him to, and nonetheless now do the welcome remarks, but just wanted to reiterate what you said, that, soil health, or seeing it as a unifier and cross-cutter when it comes to not only achieving SDGs, but also the biodiversity and desertification and various other commitments. Also to flag, my colleague will put in the chat a couple of side events at the upcoming UNEP 6 that might be of interest to some of you who are joining us in person. There's one side event among others on cultivating soil health that might be really of interest to most of you. And also happy to see already over 260 participants in this call. So I think just reflecting the importance of this topic. Then without further ado, Professor Ramesh, are you online? I hope he's not having challenges again. Ramesh? Okay, it seems like we're not going to resolve this. Perhaps you can nonetheless come in at the end. I hope most of you have seen the agenda. So as you saw, we just started with our first presentation from James Lomax. We have a few other presentations which will be followed by a Q&A session and then a closing. So with that, I think I can now hand over to the next presenter, Achim Dobermann. I hope you are with us already. Yes, I can see you. So Achim Dobermann has over 35 years of field experience working on science and technology for sustainable farming, with particular emphasis on soil science, plant nutrition, and agronomy. As chief scientist, he provides scientific advice to the IFA and its stakeholders on plant nutrition and nutrient stewardship worldwide. And Achim will now be presenting on global trends in phosphorus use efficiency. So very happy to have you, and over to you, Achim.
I just did something. Can you see my presentation still?
Yes, it's working. Thank you. Sorry, now it's gone again. Just.
Okay, now is it there?
There you go. There you go.
Okay, good afternoon. So I'd like to give an update on where we are in terms of global and regional trends in phosphorus use efficiency. So what I'm speaking about is actually the effort of a large group of people, about 20 people involved from different organizations that you can see listed here. And we got together not even 2 years ago to address the question of how we can improve global data on nutrient use, nutrient balances, nutrient use efficiency, not just for phosphorus, but also nitrogen and potassium, so the 3 macronutrients. And so we've created what we like to call global reference database for cropland nutrient balances. I'll show that in a minute. And we are together working on constantly improving this and adding annual releases to it with improved information. So I'll present the information that's relevant for phosphorus. And I'd like to make clear that we understand what we're talking about. So this is essentially a whole display of agro-food system in which you have on the left side nutrients coming in from different sources. And then, of course, we grow crops with that, we raise grassland, we feed animals, and we consume nutrients at the human end of it. And at each stage of those, of course, we also have certain losses or waste processes that we can recover and feed back into the system. So what I will be presenting today is focusing on the balances and efficiency at the entry point of this system. So what I've circled here red, the cropland. So we are still going to expand our work to the grasslands, but we haven't done this yet. So the point I want to make right here is that most of the phosphorus enters our food system at this point. So we have an input about 26 million tons each year, and 20 million tons of this elemental P goes in the form of fertilizer. So that's very important to understand what happens to that and how we can make the most use of it. So we then essentially calculate nutrient balances as the difference between the key inputs and outputs, and the nutrient use efficiency as the ratio of outputs divided by inputs. So the inputs that we take into account are phosphorus in seed and fertilizer and then manure. And the outputs is what we remove with the crop product. So we could call this a partial nutrient balances because some of the processes are not completely covered in that. The problem we often find with this is that if we try to make estimates at a larger scale, so a country, a region, or the globe, then we often encounter quite some differences in these estimates because people are using different methodologies, different assumptions, different data sources, or they're processing data in a different way. There's also generally still a lack of data sharing and standardization. And then also how you interpret these things in terms of what is good and what is bad can also vary widely. So our effort in our group is aiming to provide more harmonization of all that and steadily improving it over time. I don't have time to explain the database and methodology in more detail. The presentation will be shared after the webinar, and you can look this all up. But it's all explained in this recent publication in Earth System Science Data. And everything is essentially open access and transparent. We had a second release in November. We are now covering the period 1961 to 2021. And what we're doing there are averages for all the cropland in a country all over the world for NP and K. We've also created, I just want to point this out, a platform for open data sharing, open access of data for anything that's relevant for certain crop nutrient applications. So I encourage people to also look this up and, of course, not only use data from there, but even better, contribute your own data to it. So much for that information. Then the actual release of the database is embedded in FAO Stat. So the FAO Stat domain cropland nutrient balance. And it's the usual interfaces that people know very well. So on one side, you have the data menus, and you can download everything, of course, as you like. And then there's a visualization tab where you can create graphs, maps, line charts, and whatever else for any combinations that you like. Yeah, so I will now present some of the results for phosphorus in a sort of a higher level display. So first, when we look at the world as a whole, I think the basic conclusion that we can say is that actually global phosphorus use efficiency on cropland has been rising, but we also still have a surplus that is probably still too high. So you see on the brownish bars are the phosphorus inputs, so that's fertilizer, manure, and seed, and the green ones are what we remove with the harvest. Yeah? And both have gone up over the last 60 years, but in many ways the crop removal, because of rising crop yields and probably also more efficient fertilizer use, has gone up a little bit faster than the inputs. And so we now have an average phosphorus use efficiency that is about 70%, but it was only 43% about more than 30 years ago. Yeah, so we have had a steady rise, and if you continue on that trajectory, it's not impossible to believe that in the next 15, 20 years, we'll be reaching 80%, which would be quite a success. But we still have a surplus, that's the blue line, of about 8 million tons of phosphorus each year that one way or another ends up in the soil or in freshwater and then also marine ecosystems. And what I want to make very clear here is that 3/4 of that actually is happening in Asia. 6 million out of these 8 million tons of surplus are in Asia, and this is really a high priority to address. Now, the other key issue is that these phosphorus balances vary regionally very widely. So now they're expressed not in million tons of phosphorus, but as a cropland balance of phosphorus kilograms per hectare on an annual basis for hectare cropland. And you can see now the big difference in Asia. Our phosphorus balance on average is still above 10 kilograms surplus each hectare cropland. Yeah. Whereas in most other regions in the world, we've been able to bring this down to well below 5 kilograms, and the global average is about 5 kilograms, the black line here. And then there's one region, not quite surprisingly, which is Africa, where for the most part of its modern history, we've been running negative phosphorus balances. And that is, of course, then mining the soil and degenerating soil health. If we now look at the more detail, I'll show you 5 or 6 graphs of this kind. So they always have 2 lines. The blue line, which is the phosphorus balance per hectare cropland in kilograms per hectare P, and the orange line, which is the phosphorus use efficiency. And we'll start with Western Africa. And that just reiterates what I've just said before. So the phosphorus balance on average has always been negative, never reached a positive value in the last 60 years, and actually has become even more negative in the last 20 years. Now, every year, every hectare, we're losing about 3 kilos of P from the soil in these systems. Well, in the last 20 years, nearly 60 kilograms have been extracted from the soil. And the phosphorus efficiency is unnaturally high, over 200%, which reflects a soil mining situation. So we have negative balance, continued mining, low input, low output situation affecting about 500 million people in that region. If we move to Brazil, we have a very different situation. So Brazil has gone through a period of intensification of agriculture, which was also because of the soil types prevalent there, involving the use of phosphorus at high rates to overcome fixation issues, but also increasing yields needed to have more phosphorus in crops like soybean or corn. So you can see a rising phosphorus balance. The surplus is now often 20 kilograms per hectare, which is concerning. The efficiency is still not too low, but it could be much higher too. So I would say here we have a situation of a country where the large and rising P surplus is now becoming a concern, and the efficiency is still at a low level. And there's definitely now a time to look at a potential change in strategy. In India, we're moving across now. We've had, again, a different situation. So also because of the intensification of agriculture, we've moved from a negative balance in the 1960s and 70s to a slightly positive balance, and now a significantly positive balance, still rising in some form with ups and downs. And what's more important there is that the phosphorus use efficiency essentially hasn't changed for over 20 years. So it has remained pretty low at about 50%. And this is also probably the result of subsidy policies that affect nutrient use heavily in India. If we move to China, again, we see a very different trajectory. So first, it followed very much what we see also in India. So rising phosphorus surpluses with the intensification of agriculture, and in Chinese case, going to very high surpluses about 10 years ago. And what we now see, due to a change in policy, a significant drop in the surpluses, actually quite fast. And the efficiency, which used to hover around 40%, is now starting to approach close to 60%. So we can see here an example where a change in policy, because of excessive use of nutrients like phosphorus or nitrogen, causing environmental issues, has actually shown very significant fast results. In the European Union, the 27 states that are now members of it, we've had a situation where for decades now already, surpluses of phosphorus that used to be quite high have been eroding now to quite low levels, and in many countries actually probably mining soil already that has been accumulated. So legacy phosphorus that's sitting in the soil from sometimes 50, 60, 70 years ago. And the efficiency of fertilizer of phosphorus has gone up to on average about 70%. There's still some room to improve this, and I think I would also point out that this is, of course, very diverse among the different countries and their cropping or agricultural systems in Europe. And finally, the United States as an example of a very high use efficiency. So we've had in the US now about 40 years of declining surpluses, reaching now actually into the slightly negative range, and associated yield increases that drove high use efficiencies, which are now hovering about 100%. So there are local hotspots that, of course, presents to problems, but by and large, this is about as efficient as it can get. it is possible that we now actually in some places have situations where we are mining phosphorus from the soil, and you need to ask, of course, then always the question, how long can you do this? But we can see that across the world, and you could continue analyzing many countries in that manner, we generally follow a trajectory as economic development proceeds, as crop intensification technologies change and policies change. We go from increasing fertilizer use or nutrient input use to then, which then creates often initially some surpluses and lowers phosphorus use efficiency, to then situations where technologies and the policies address the nutrients more clearly. And that's when we often then start seeing some decline in inputs. We see a decline in the surplus and a substantial increase in the use efficiencies. So in many regions in the world, we're on that trajectory now, which is encouraging. But we also have other major countries or regions where this is not the case. So I pointed out India as a case with low efficiency and stagnation, if you wish. And I pointed out Sub-Saharan Africa, where we really have to actually, as a top priority, put more phosphorus into the agricultural system, because otherwise this continent will never make progress in becoming more food secure. So these are my summary points. We have a global cropland balance of about 5 kilograms plus in terms of phosphorus each year, which hasn't really changed in the last 30 years, but regionally it varies widely. We've seen, in fact, a cropland P use efficiency that has risen from 43% in 1988 to about 70% on average at present. And we think a lot more is still possible. That's encouraging. And we could say the same for nitrogen, by the way. We've seen countries like China making rapid progress in reducing an unsustainable surplus and increasing its efficiency, whereas others like Brazil and India are not at this stage yet. And then the Africa situation, I think, really needs to be addressed with high priority. I think we cannot achieve much improvement in Africa with just more recycling of P, which of course is always desirable and important, but we really need to have much more significant input into the agricultural system to improve soils and make crops a lot more productive. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Achim. A really great presentation. Interesting to see that global phosphorus use efficiency is actually rising, and also just demonstrating the data across the globe, kind of reflecting the implementation and also success of some of the policies that have been implemented. As you say, some encouraging trajectories and some highlight definitely the need to do more. So yeah, thank you again for that. As we already mentioned, this webinar is jointly organized with the IFA, so great to have Achim here as a presenter. We also have the FAO as co-organizer, who has some presenters. I just wanted to briefly say to kindly put your questions in the Q&A section. As I mentioned, after our presentations, we have some dedicated time for a Q&A session. And those questions that cannot be addressed during that time frame will definitely be addressed afterwards in our report. Together, we will also share the recording and the presentations on our website. So thank you very much for that. And I think now I can hand over to our next presenters. We actually have two speakers coming in now from the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. First of all, Veronica Santoro. She has worked at the University of Torino, where she researched phosphorus cycles in soil and plant responses to phosphorus deficiency at the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform, in short, the ESPP, and she's helping to define a long-term vision for phosphorus sustainability in Europe. As you may know, the ESPP is based in Brussels. And then we have Mr. Ludwig Herrmann. He has over 35 years of experience as a technology, sustainability, and innovation manager. He was also co-founder and long-term CEO of Umwelt AG. I hope I said that right. and is a co-inventor of minerals and ash decontamination, phosphorus recovery, energy conversion, and efficiency technologies. Yeah, so without further ado, I'm not sure who is starting from both of you, but I just hand it over to you for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. So as Sarah already introduced, we would like to say a few words about European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. It is an association that was established 10 years ago to promote and implement phosphorus sustainability and recycling of nutrients in Europe. It has nearly 50 members that you can see here who represent industry, including the water, the waste, fertilizers, chemical and recycling sectors, but also regions and cities, research institutes and projects, and national nutrient platforms. The added value that ESPP brings to its members is definitely the network. So the platform itself and all the actors that are part of it, which gives access to a wide range of expertise and as well as to the possibility to work together with policymakers, stakeholders, and various international organizations. And of course, we act as a showcase for the success stories of the members and for the innovation that they bring to society. The need to increase the circularity of nutrients has been made highly visible, as it was already mentioned, for instance, by the fertilizer supply and price crisis, by the concerns about food security, food prices, and of course, environmental problems. Europe has at the moment a number of major policy and initiatives that are underway that ESPP is following as they are relevant to nutrients, and some of which are listed here in the slide, and they include the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, a soil health law, a fertilizer product regulation, and also the possible recast of a sewage sludge directive and different others. Phosphorus circularity is essential because on the white side, resources are limited. We depend greatly on imports and on the geopolitical stability of the countries from where phosphorus is imported. And on the other side, phosphorus is one of the most important causes of water quality failure, and a lot of phosphorus ends up in surface water, causing great environmental damages. Many technologies to recover phosphorus from wastes, from secondary raw materials to side streams are today available. We try to summarize them in this slide, and we will provide some real examples operating in Europe. But first, we just wanted to point out that on ESPP website, you can find a technology catalog, which is constantly updated with technologies categorized according to the nutrients recovered, so not only phosphorus, but also nitrogen and potassium, according to the process type, the input material, the output, and so on. So in case you need, you can go back to it, or also if you need some more specification or details. So inspired from this catalog, we would like to present the technologies through already operating examples across Europe, starting from these examples from Sweden. So a way to recover and reuse phosphorus, but also nitrogen and organic carbon, is the use of sewage biosolids, so treated sewage sludge in agriculture after sanitization and stabilization. In Sweden, there is a certification system that has been established to ensure the high quality of the digestate that is produced from anaerobic digestion. And today, more than 50% of wastewater in Sweden goes to certified sewage works, and this allows the reuse and the recycle to agriculture of over 1,600 tons of phosphorus per year. Recycled nutrients can also be used to grow biomass, and one example is the growth of algae, which can then be used for the production of valuable products like fertilizing products, animal feeds, human food ingredients, or even energy. And in this picture, you can see on the left the plant in Chiclana in the south of Spain, and one in the UK, so maybe less sunny weather, but still they are growing algae. And algae, of course, are not the only options. There are many others, and one that is particularly important today is also the growth of jackweed. Then, in the case of soluble containing phosphorus streams, so like in the case of wastewater treatment plants that operate biological phosphorus removal and anaerobic digestion, but also other phosphorus-containing liquids from food processing, mining or industry, manure, source-separated urine, for example. Phosphorus can be recovered through the precipitation of struvite, which is an ammonium magnesium phosphate that can be used as fertilizer or blended in other products. It is a slow release, low leaching and not root burning fertilizer, so it is a good product. And today around 100 full-scale struvite units are operating worldwide. And in EU, we have examples in Belgium, in Denmark, in the Netherlands. And on the right, you can see a company that is producing these pearls of struvite and testing them as fertilizers. And as you can see, roots seem to quite like them. And recently, this product has obtained the CE mark, so it is registered as a fertilizer under the European Fertilizer Products Regulation. Another route to recycling phosphorus can be through the pyrolysis of organic materials in general, with the production of biochar, which has the positive aspect of bringing carbon and binding carbon in the long term in the soil. It can increase crop productivity and drought resistance. Here you have an example of a German company that produces pyrolysis units. And similar to this, another process is incineration, which happens at higher temperature than pyrolysis and in the presence of oxygen, where ashes are produced. These ashes are enriched with phosphorus, so they can be treated to obtain different types of products. They can be, for example, introduced in the process of fertilizer production in the acidulation phase that can release the phosphorus. They can be dissolved in acid to recover phosphorus in the form of calcium phosphate, as a Swedish company is doing, as you can see on the left. Ashes can also be used to produce phosphoric acid in a process that is similar to phosphoric acid production from phosphate rock. And to increase phosphorus availability to plants and also to remove heavy metal, which is often an issue that limits recycled products used in agriculture, the incineration process can be modified by adding other compounds during the incineration process. So in the first case on the left, with the addition of sodium carbonate or bicarbonate, it is obtained a calcium sodium phosphate, which is also known as modified Renania phosphate. While in the second case, the addition of chlorides helps reducing the heavy metal content. Some final examples. So other technologies regard, for example, the use of iron salts to precipitate phosphorus, which is actually the most widely used technique in sewage works worldwide. But this example we report here is particular because they precipitate vivianite, which is an iron 2 phosphate, which is magnetic and therefore can be easily separated from the rest of sewage sludge through a magnet, and then can be used in soils which are iron deficient rather than phosphorus deficient. And another technology under development, it's on the right, is about the development of adsorbents for phosphorus that are mainly iron-based, so as iron oxide or iron-containing secondary material. They can be used to accumulate phosphorus for preventing, for example, phosphorus leaching or to remove phosphorus from waters. But of course, to reuse these materials, for example, in agriculture, a way to release this phosphorus must be found. So after this encouraging panorama of available technologies for phosphorus recovery, I leave the floor to Ludwig to compare the potential for phosphorus recovery and reuse with reality. Ludwig, I think you are muted.
Ludwig, you are muted.
Thank you, Veronica, for giving me the floor and let me bringing you a little bit down to the reality of the real phosphorus potential and the realities of what is going on currently. And as Achim correctly said, we are you first need to have phosphorus in the cycle, in the loop, before you can recycle it. So if we look here at this slide, we have about 1.1 million tons of P in Europe consumed, and we have what you see on the right side. We have about 1.1 million tons as a potential for recycling. But of course, this is a technical potential, and this is not realistic to get all back into the loop. So there will always be some losses. Next slide, please. If we look, next slide. Yeah, if we look at the potential that we have from sewage sludge, and this is particularly mentioned as recycling is always associated with a cost, and only if we have let's say a balanced potential for raising or for financing this cost, and this is what is possible if we talk about sewage sludge, where we have already a cost for wastewater treatment, and adding the small surcharge of peer recycling is a realistic option in Europe. So as you see on this frame, we have about 9 million tons of sewage sludge in Europe in the loop. And on the left side, you see that many countries use most of this sludge on cropland, as Veronica has presented, partly in a quality control system. And if you look at the down the picture, the graph, you see the more incinerated and more landfill fractions of this phosphorus. So currently about 1/4 of the whole sewage sludge in Europe is incinerated, and therefore phosphorus can be recovered from the ash. And the other 3/4 are either used directly in agriculture or can be used for recycling technologies such as struvite or vivianite, as Veronica has presented. Next slide, please. The current or within the current frame, what we have, and this is an integrated nutrient management action plan that was presented in 2023 by the European Commission. We see a study that was conceived by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and they come to a realistic potential of about 0.3 million tons of P recovery potential in mineral fertilizers and about 0.3 million tons P in organic fertilizing products. So half and half, mineral and organic, and altogether about 600,000 tons of P. And remember, we are consuming 1.1 billion tons in Europe. Next slide, please. What we currently have in the currently operating peer recovery and peer recycling plants, you see that at present, in terms of struvite, which means recovery directly from sewage sludge, we have a present recovery of about 25,000 tons of struvite, which means about 3,000 tons of P. And this is for Europe, and the global capacity is about 5,000 tons. So we are talking about 5,000 tons total recovery as a mineral fertilizer struvite. If we look at the recovery potential from ash, we are currently about recovering 16,000 tons of P in Europe, and we have a total recovery potential of about 50,000 tons of P from ash in the forthcoming years with the projects that are currently underway in Europe. Next slide, please. And I think I'm ready with the introduction to the figures. Just one more remark to the technology development that we usually see. Of course, we are currently in the left side here. So we are in the beginning of recovery technologies to be rolled out in the market. And as usual, we will see a progress, and we will see a higher efficiency, and we will see a lower cost. So we can expect that technologies can make a lot of, or can bring about a lot of progress, and in the end, the recovery rates can unfold to this, let's say, maximum potential that we see of recovering and recycling approximately 60% of the total consumption in the high-income countries. In the low-income countries, we have still a long way to go to achieve these kind of recycling rates. Next slide. And I think giving the stage back, yes, to Veronica for the conclusions. And well, no, not yet. I'm still talking about resources as a service, which is one model that is proposed, among others, by the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, where we, instead of selling commodities, we look at the function of fertile soils. And if we look at the function of fertile soils, we have the opportunity that fertilizing product manufacturers or service companies provide the service of fertile soil by using all kinds of tools that are currently available and which are probably not available to a single farmer, particularly not if it's a small-scale farmer that cannot afford to buy and and doesn't also have access to all these tools that are currently on the market. So this is an opportunity which should and could be further developed and could bring about an additional increase in efficiency and a reduction in losses in line with the European Green Deal, and we have Green Deals also in other parts of the world, and the Farm to Fork strategy. And I think now I give back to Veronica. She will make the conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludwig, for bringing us back to reality. So yes, to wrap up, we can say that many technologies are surely available for phosphorus recovery, but to have an economy that would be able to grow without corresponding increases in environmental pressure, a higher efficiency of the processes is needed. We need to improve the reality of recycling, also exploiting low-grade resources. And as we have seen that the potential is big. Phosphorus recycling may be regionally competitive, but it is hampered by the current low recovery rates and the fluctuating quality of products. And so also the gap between the technical recycling and the potential and the real recycling potential should be filled also with the creation of new and different business models. And with this, I think we have concluded. Thank you for the attention, and these are our contacts, so if you have questions.
Thank you so much to both of you. Great insights into phosphorus recovery technologies. I am a little bit conscious of time. We're running a bit late, but also wanted to invite colleagues Veronica and Ludwig to post any relevant links in the chat, including on your catalog. And I personally find your newsletter extremely helpful. So please feel free to kind of link to further resources in the chat. And then with that, I would hand over to our last present from our core organizer from the Food and Agriculture Organization. We have Ms. Benisa Sainz with us. She's a biologist specializing in carbon and nitrogen cycling in the plant, soil, atmosphere system of agricultural lands, forestry systems. She holds a PhD in soil science from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and is currently in the coordination of the International Network on Soil Fertility and Fertilizers. So without further ado, I would hand it over to you, Benisa. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, good afternoon to all the participants, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. So today I would like to share with you some information and some thoughts about food production and nutrient loss. So we cannot talk about food production without talking about soils, because actually, as the first presenter said, soils is where food begins, because more than 95% of the food that we consume comes from soil. So almost all of our calories and proteins come from the animals and the plants that we eat and consume, and all of them depend directly or indirectly from soils. So it's pretty obvious and clear that we need to keep our soils healthy. But soils are in clear danger. So when foods are produced by healthy and fertile soils, then these foods are nutritious and wholesome. There is a very close link between soil degrading processes and fertility loss. And currently, about 1/3 of the soils of the crop soils of the planet are presenting some erosion or degradation, some form of degradation at some extent. And nutrient imbalance is one of these type of soil health threats. It is very rare that we find soils that are perfectly nutrient balanced. So on one side, we have that there are nutrient depleted soils producing nutrient deficient crops and contributing to animal and nutrient deficiencies. And on the other side, we have soils that are nutrient overloaded, contributing to environmental contamination and climate change. So actually, nutrient imbalance has been identified as one of the major 10 threats to soil health in the status of the World Soil Resources, published in 2015, then the Voluntary Guidelines for Sustainable Soil Management and the International Code of Conduct for the Sustainable Use and Management of Fertilizers, provide some recommendations to avoid nutrient imbalances by reducing or avoiding underuse, misuse, and overuse of fertilizers, which are primary causes of nutrient imbalance. So in order to avoid nutrient imbalance and nutrient depleted or nutrient overloaded soils, we need to understand the nutrient loss pathways. In the case of phosphorus, the main pathways of losses are by erosion and also by crop harvest. But there are also other sources of phosphorus export, such as runoff and leaching. So let's start briefly analyzing the different nutrient loss pathways, and we start by nutrient underuse. So why do soils can produce nutrient depleted crops or edible parts of the crops? Because soils are the primary source of nutrients that we all need to thrive. Soils form, store, and transfer and recycle the nutrients that we need. So on Earth, there are 92 naturally occurring chemical elements, and of these, 18 are essential to plants and 15 are supplied by soils. But this only happens when soils are healthy and receive nutrient replenishment after crop harvest. But soil fertility is being lost, and this is happening because very frequently, the phosphorus that is exported in nutrient harvest is not replenished by organic or inorganic fertilizers. So there are very many approaches that are useful for ameliorating this undernourished scenario. One of them is sustainable soil management for nutrition-sensitive agriculture. So nutrition-sensitive agriculture is a food-based approach to agricultural development that puts nutritionally rich foods, dietary diversity, and food fortification at the heart to overcome malnutrition. Why? Because vegetables and many crops are less nutritious than they used to be 70 years ago, when they were packed with vitamins and nutrients and proteins. And this is happening because, as Dr. Ismail Kakmak said in one presentation, is the three deep problems related to depletion of nutrients in soils, dilution of nutrients in grain and edible parts of the crops, and degradation of soils. So last year, the technical guidelines of sustainable on soil for nutrition were published, and this document provides some recommendations, general recommendations to ameliorate nutrient deficiencies in soils and in crops, including increasing soil organic matter, improving soil health, promoting crop diversification, and crop pulses is a wonderful example that by using this type of crops, nutrient mobilization and solubilization can be achieved. Also use fertilizer wisely, and balanced fertilizer plants are needed, not only fertilizing with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but also using micronutrients. Make use of biofortification strategies for more nutritious food. Biofortified varieties can be used, but also the elements, the nutritive elements can be added directly to soils. Then also choose sustainable soil management practices according to a cost-benefit analysis and according to the national reality and even to the cultural reality of the different countries. Building capacities is a key element in any plan for increasing nutrient and soil fertility. And of course, mainstreaming sustainable soil management for nutrition-sensitive agriculture. I guess in the last decade, we have witnessed that soil biodiversity has emerged as a cross-cutting solution to soil fertility loss, to increase soil fertility, and also for the recovery of soil fertility, especially soil microbes. It's been extensively documented and proven that these microbes can help significantly to the solubilization and mobilization of nutrients, especially in the case of phosphorus. So there are other nutrient loss pathways, such as nutrient overuse and misuse. So when soils are overloaded with nutrients because of fertilizer overuse or misuse, we have above ground effects. Such, for example, crops are more prone to diseases and pests. We have greenhouse gas emissions warming the planet, especially in the case of nitrogen, plant lodging, but we also have below ground effects. For example, nutrient leaching, eventually contaminating groundwater and aquatic ecosystems, excessive or changes in pH, toxicity for plants and animals, and affectations to soil biodiversity. Planetary boundaries. Research have shown that both global and regional boundaries for safe operating space of phosphorus are exceeded. And this is because the biogeochemical global cycles of phosphorus and nitrogen have been severely modified. So these studies show that the global boundary of phosphorus in order from fresh water, the fluxes from freshwater to the ocean should not exceed 11 teragrams of phosphorus, and we have already doubled this amount. It's the same case. We are supposed not to exceed 6 teragrams per year in the application of fertilizers in order to avoid environmental effects such as eutrophication or biodiversity loss. But very clearly, we have almost tripled this boundary. So it is very clear that we need a paradigm shift through a portfolio of solutions to go from current focus on agriculture to sustainable agri-food systems, to go from low crop diversity, high mineral fertilizer rates, greenhouse gases emission and soil degradation, to wholesome, responsible produced foods, long-term productivity, and minimal environmental impact and a more nutrient carbon footprint. So there are several actions that can be taken, like improving soil fertility, increase soil organic additions, and harness soil microbiology. But there are actions beyond the farm that can be implemented. For example, monitoring fertilizer safety and quality, monitoring and mapping soil fertility, and of course, capacity development. And there is a lot that can be done. We have a portfolio of solutions, including to increase nutrient use efficiency, including phosphorus use efficiency, such as nature-based solution tools, also the traditional management-based tools like managing properly the fertilizer source, rate, time, and place, and also the technological tools that are available in order to be combined or to get and work together with these other two strategies, such as weather alerts, sensors, models, web calculators, etc. We have also alternative nutrient sources to increase nutrient efficiency and availability, such as the use of fertilizers with its challenges, of course, and biostimulants with the corresponding, that should go with the corresponding quality assessment, but also the fact that waste are not waste, and they can be a very important nutrient source, as we just saw with a wonderful presentation that just preceded me. I'm not stopping here because this topic has already been extensively addressed in the previous presentation. And finally, I would like to talk about other pathways of loss that are crop harvest and soil erosion, particularly soil erosion. More than 50% of the global phosphorus loss in agriculture is attributable to soil erosion. There are regions in the world like Africa, Eastern Europe, and South America that register the greatest phosphorus losses with limited options to mitigate the problem. So attention should be also paid to this type of degradation problems. And also there are other nutrient loss pathways such as food waste and agricultural disasters. So about over 1/3 of our food goes to waste, and less than 30% of the 35 million tons of phosphorus applied to soils annually make it into the food that we eat. So globally, on average, 65 kilograms of the food is wasted per year by one person. For example, 25 is wasted in vegetables and 24% in cereals and 12% in fruits. Also, agricultural disasters is an important vehicle of nutrient losses. So total agricultural losses from disasters reported an amount of 30 billion per year, mostly from different disasters, but mainly from floods, wildfires, and drought. And just as an example, you have here interesting key figures. For example, losses in cereals amounted to an average of 69 million tons per year in the last 3 decades, corresponding to the entire cereal production of France in 2021, for example. And there are other interesting figures in the case of fruits and vegetables, but also meats and dairy products. So this report in 2023 highlights that compared to daily dietary requirements, nutrient losses appear to be particularly important in the case of iron, phosphorus, magnesium, and thiamine. So agricultural losses of cereals are an important source of phosphorus leakage, especially in the case of cereals and also of oil seeds. Of course, there are other driving forces that are in synergy with all the nutrient pathway losses that I just mentioned, such as water availability, floodings, and also droughts, climate change, poverty, and the increase of fertilizer prices, war conflicts, pandemics, also legislation to produce, apply, and assess nutrient sources and nutrient losses is remaining as a huge opportunity area to improve. And also quality assessment is important because we all know that phosphate rock may contain contaminants depending on the source of the phosphorus rock, including heavy metals that can be transferred to the food chain, causing very serious public health problems. And finally, I would like to invite you all to join the International Network on Soil Fertility and Fertilizers, which aims to adopt and implement sustainable soil fertility management, avoiding the underuse, misuse, and overuse of fertilizers to reduce environmental health impacts and promote sustainable fertilizer use. We have 3 different areas of work to promote soil fertility and nutrient monitoring systems, soil fertility and fertilizer management, and fertilizer and safety and quality assessment. So thank you very much for your attention. So let's bring back nutrients to soils. Thank you, Sarah. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I think you have really closed the circle very well, so to say. We had James starting with the ecological foundations of sustainable food systems, and now you highlighting the need for sustainable soil management for nutrition-sensitive agriculture. So I think a really great wrap to all the presentations. Also that you highlighted planetary boundaries and that the global and regional boundaries for safe operating space for phosphorus have been exceeded. We're certainly looking forward to the upcoming UN Environment Assembly in Nairobi, hosted by UNEP in less than 2 weeks, actually, and hopefully having more in-depth discussions on some of these challenges. So thank you once again to our presenters. I think then I would like to hand over to Mr. Kim Haiko from the Plant Production and Protection Division at the FAO to moderate our Q&A session. Over to you, Kim.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you to all the presenters that provided a wealth of information. I would kindly ask all the presenters to put the camera on so that also our participant can see you. There has been a lot of questions in the Q&A and the chat, but in particular, Akim has been very active to try to respond to many of the very technical questions, and I will maybe take the time to highlight some of them, just that the audience that has not read through can also benefit from some of the answers. In the order of presentation, I would first go to James. I think your presentation, James, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Yes, good. So as at the last presentation, Vinicia also highlighted this overall, importance of soil health and the status where we're at on the planetary boundary. You both, highlighted the overall importance of soil health. From your perspective, looking at back the presentation, the technological solution that was given, and the regional context of the way in this in this workshop, we are trying to provide our audience on how the management of phosphate fertilizers could be more sustainable for feeding the world. What would be the key take-home messages for UNEP taking into account of these situation, the solution, the area of work that you would highlight, and the importance, as Sarah mentioned, of some of the upcoming high-level events? What would be the key messages for the policymakers, for the farmers, for the researchers to work together in this area?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm sure that my colleague Vanessa will have more to say about this, because I thought her presentation was very sort of complemented very much the one that we put forward from UNEP's perspective. I think so. My concern, I think, about looking at particular elements. So we were looking at nitrogen, now we're looking at phosphorus. Is that, in my experience, the application of these elements are not separate. They are connected. They are the they are the same part of a compound fertilizer. So I think, yeah, you know, we could get very technical about kind of the importance of soils and things, and I think there's all sorts of. I thought the presentation from ESPP was very good as well, because it showed, if you like, there are more things that we could do. It's not just about, you know, the land, if you like, but if we can get a political focus onto the importance of maintaining soil health, and then incentivizing or taking away the disincentives for soil health, then I think we're going in a really good way. I think we're entering a really interesting time globally, and I can see that global markets are going to be disrupted for quite a long time. So this situation around looking at alternatives that are closer to home, I think, is really important. And then understanding that, for me, the co-benefits of working on soil health, as both FAO and UNEP put forward, I think are critical. So I think, yeah, I think looking beyond the particular elements, I think, are quite important from this case. And critically, what I like to say is, and it's the last thing I'll say here, is that we have to get the messaging, I think, to policymakers in a way that makes sense and where co-benefits are clear. So I think joining together these issues around the Global Biodiversity Framework, the SDGs, other commitments, I think, are critical. At UNEP, our constituencies are ministries of environment, and I think asking very much for ministries of environment to, instead of just looking at the impact, but working with ministries of agriculture to take joined up approaches to improving the situation of soil, I think is a really important point. But I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Definitely, I mean, in the global partnership that we are together on nutrient management, I think that's also the way we try to convey the message to the respective Ministry of Environment and Agriculture, that they also can talk together when they make these policies to take both into account of the environmental protection and need, as well as the food security related issue. Vinicia, could you complement some of the point on how we work also together with our different partners on this issue, just shortly, so that I can follow up with some more technical questions? Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I fully agree with my colleague, James. I just would add that in addition to what you said, Kim, that when it seems that there are many initiatives that converge in the same goal, of course, which is very good. But I think what is missing now is to join forces in the implementation of many of the initiatives that we have, and taking in consideration, of course, the farmers' needs. But I guess I would add that implementation is urgent in local farms scale, and also capacity development. I think those are key issues that need to be addressed to finally unlock the potential of all the initiatives that we have to increase nutrient use efficiency and soil health. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, James, Vinicia. I'll go now. Hopefully we can have a few more minutes. I know that we are set to finish at 3, but there are a number of questions that probably would be of interest for those who are listening. So if the organizers allow, we can take another 5-10 minutes to entertain some of the specific technical questions. Akim, I saw you are responding to most of the questions that were asked. Would you have a couple of ones that you would detail a bit more? You mentioned that, of course, the common work that we're working and this analysis jointly that is done, it's all the information are publicly available, and you emphasize the continent. It depends on each region, the path that taken on phosphorus efficiency and the solution. Could you highlight some of these questions that you answered to, and also the context-based solution that needs to be provided, especially for countries like India, Sub-Saharan Africa, and so forth?
Yeah. There were a couple of questions around why it is that in some places or some countries you have phosphorus surpluses, or in others there are less or becoming less, or the efficiency rises faster. And so I think my general view on this is that the main contributing factor is, first of all, the crop yield. So if you have a situation where in a country or in parts of it crop yields are too low, then often, for many reasons, that may have nothing to do with phosphorus. So then, of course, you're also removing less phosphorus with the crop than you apply often with the fertilizer and manure and other sources. And so anything that constrains crop yield growth, and that would be particularly the case in most of sub-Saharan Africa, but also in other parts of the world, needs to be looked at, because it makes no sense to apply nutrients if you cannot convert them into crop biomass and yield. So, and that has nothing to do with the phosphorus itself directly. So then the second part of that is then, of course, you have these situations where, for a variety of reasons, the incentive system has been such that people tend to apply more than they should be. Sometimes that is like a safety cushion. And historically, we've also seen, for example, in the 19th century or early part of the 20th century, when we didn't even have nitrogen fertilizers yet, so yields were limited by that nutrient, farmers were already applying phosphate. And so we were typically, for decades in Europe or North America or also Australia, applying far more phosphorus than was needed. And now, of course, a lot of that is still sitting in the soil, and if you wish, can be remobilized to some extent at least. So these are specific situations that when you look at the nutrient like not phosphorus, you always have to look at a legacy. And that's very different from nitrogen, because nitrogen doesn't store. So we have a legacy that we need to adjust our current management also to the past, in some ways. And if that legacy has been a surplus, then we can comfortably go down a little bit. And if that legacy, like in Africa, has been a deficit, then we need to do even more to put back more in before we can even talk about recycling or other things. So I think it's very important to keep those things in mind. And the third factor is, of course, anything we can do to improve the actual efficiency of the fertilizer or manure phosphorus applied. And soil scientists will know that when we put the fertilizer on, only about 15 to 20% of that phosphorus ends up in the crop in the first year of application. A few more percent in subsequent years, but the rest just sits in the soil or runs off the field. And so that 20% is much less than recovery efficiency than what we get for nutrients like nitrogen or potassium. And there are chemical reasons for that, but it's, I think, a big innovation area still possible, how we can increase that efficiency of the fertilizer as such, because it's, if you wish, a non-renewable resource that we are mining. And so I think there's still a lot possible in that space. And even if we were able to just increase it from 20 to 25 or 30% on average, it would make a huge difference on a global scale. So these are just some comments to several of these questions that were there.
Yes, thank you. So you can go through the Q&A chat box. Kim had replied to many of the specific questions that you asked, and same thing for other presenters. they can add up some of these. I believe they would be still active. I would now ask a couple of questions to Veronica and Ludwig. I mean, from the presentation that you gave, you provided a lot of elements on technical solutions and policy level intervention that could be. A lot of our audience are asking the economical case for recovery use. How can it become viable compared to the amount production versus the current level of use and recovery? Some of your immediate reaction on some of these questions on how could the model that the technology available in Europe could be applied in a region or other region, and then also how can it be economically viable?
Should I answer? Okay. So yes. So I already answered also in the chats and to the questions. Usually we have two cases. We have the municipal case where we have P in our human excretions, and we have the agricultural case where we have P in the agricultural residues. When it is in the municipal, in the human excretions, the case is quite easy, at least if you have a wastewater treatment in place. And if you have a wastewater treatment, you can add P recycling. And it has a certain cost, but in comparison to the whole to the whole wastewater treatment cost, it is just a minimum surplus. So in this case, P can be recycled. The citizen is the polluter. She or he pays the cost. And for the fertilizing product manufacturer, nothing changes because the manufacturer gets phosphoric acid or calcium phosphate or any product from these P recycling activities to be integrated into the fertilizing product value chain. If you go to the agricultural residues, the problem is more pronounced because you have no citizen who would pay, and everything you add there would make the food production more expensive, and this is what nobody wants. So integrating recycling, technical recycling. Don't forget, we already recycling a lot of manure because we apply it directly on land, and this is still the prevailing method of recycling P from manure, with the only deficiency that in high livestock density regions, sometimes too much manure is used on too little cropland. So there is a surplus still coming from this overloading cropland with manure from high livestock density regions. But otherwise, it could be balanced by reducing livestock on one hand, and on the other hand, but this is the business case challenge to recycle manure. And here I can only point to this technical development that hopefully will allow in the future to recycle nutrients and phosphorus at a lower cost. I hope this was clear.
Thank you. Yes. Veronica, would you like to complement?
I think Ludwig explained it really in a complete way. So no, I totally agree.
Yes, thank you. Well, there are still a number of questions that are across the board. So we will try to come back to some of them or consolidate the answers that have been given. I just put up one comment. Well, we have reached, of course, it's been seen that the nitrogen phosphorus planetary boundaries are reached out, and our audience is asking how can this platform promote or streamline practices that have been shown throughout the presentation, but that we are all working in our various fields with different stakeholders. So on the way plant production and how we can sustainably feed the world, it's still a challenge that we are trying jointly through this type of platform to answer. There are technically a solution available. There are more innovation, research, and data that are collected. And hopefully we could, in the different upcoming platform, we can also all try to contribute to influence the policy makers and the global community to address this solution in a sustainable way, taking into account of the environmental issue that we're facing, but also the growing world population, still a big challenge in many regions of the world. So that's said, I think this type of platform, and I see we had over 600 people that had registered. We tried to go back to those. We had over 200 people attending throughout this webinar. We'll come back with all the questions that were asked to consolidate them. Thanks to all the presenters for their insightful information. Probably this is not sufficient to answer all these. We see the excitement and the many questions that are still to be answered. So that's something that probably with now we have Ramesh, so he could probably wrap up with some words. Sarah, I give back to you the moderation. Thanks to all the presenters, and I let you to close with some concluding words. Yeah, with our Ramesh and Patrick. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kim, for the excellent moderation of the Q&A, and also just echoing, really impressive to have seen so many participants and registrants. Despite the fact that it's Valentine's Day, I'm sure some people now want to get home or run some last errands. But just very briefly, handing over to Ramesh, and then also Mr. Patrick Heffer and my colleague Stephanie for the closing. But Ramesh, let's start with you very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to be very brief. I just wanted to do the very good seminar, insightful seminar on sustainable phosphorus management. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of your very active participation and sincere appreciation to the eminent speakers for the invaluable presentation and insight, and also the expertise and highlighted the critical role of phosphorus management in enhancing the soil health, optimizing the food production, and mitigating the nutrient loss. Discussion on phosphorus recovery and reuse have opened a lot of new avenues for sustainable practices in nutrient management. I would like to thank the UNEP team, represented by Stefan, Sarah, Vandru, and other colleagues for their dedication in organizing this webinar, along with the FIO and IFA. In collaboration, have been influential in making this event a very successful event. I could see that we conclude by taking this knowledge and insight gained today to support and implement sustainable phosphorus management practices in our respective regions and communities. Let us continue to raise awareness, explore these opportunities for nutrient recycling, and work towards more sustainable and inclusive agri-food systems. Once again, thank you for your participation and commitment to this important cause. We also look forward to your continued support and collaboration in your future endeavors. Thank you. Back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, and also thank you for your continued support as chair of the GPNM. I hand it over very briefly now to Mr. Patrick Heffer. He's the Deputy Director General at the IFA. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So great webinar, and we have been delighted to co-organize this webinar with UNEP, FAO, and under the GPNM umbrella. So it addresses a very important topic because good phosphorus management is essential for feeding the world sustainably. A topic that we did not address today because of time constraints is world phosphate rock reserves and resources. And I will just say a very few words about this one, because last year we released an updated assessment of world phosphate rock reserves and resources. Basically, there are three messages. First, we have global phosphate rock resources. It has been assessed at 300 billion tons. I'm not talking about million, billion tons. So that's very large amounts. And technically recoverable phosphate with existing, let's say, technologies is expected to last at least 300 years. And that's the low estimate. But at the same time, the third key message is that geologic depletion should not be the only key consideration. And in this connection, let's say, to increase the lifespan of existing reserves and resources and to ensure long-term supply, it remains imperative to, on the one hand, further reduce losses during mining and processing of phosphate rock. Second, to also increase the recovery and recycling from various waste streams. And we have heard from ESPP there are plenty of technologies available for that. And third, to improve phosphorus use efficiency at the farm level, and like Kim talked about it. So these are the key three interventions that we need to do to improve, let's say, to increase the lifespan of these reserves and resources. And at IFA, so we are a platform of, let's say, plant nutrition solutions providers, largely from the private sector. So we are working on these three streams, developing and investing in innovative solutions. For instance, we are working more and more with startups to find solutions to some of these pressing issues. We are also partnering with a number of stakeholders to have an impact at scale, because at the end, that's what we need. So let me finish by a big thank you to our presenters for having shared their insights today. And thank you to everyone for listening. Over to you, Sarah and Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hand it over to Stephanie, my colleague in the nutrients team, to give the last closing remarks on behalf of UNEP. Over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll be very brief as well. Indeed, I would like to join the chair of the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management and International Fertilizer Association in thanking the panelists for their presentations and all the participants that joined today's webinar on management of phosphate fertilizers for feeding the world sustainably, which explored sustainable phosphorus management practices, promoting healthy soils and the reduction of loss and waste of nutrients through innovative solutions, including the recovery and reuse of phosphorus. I would like to thank as well the Food and Agriculture Organization and again the International Fertilizer Association for co-organizing today's webinar along with UNEP. And finally, I would like to also invite everyone to join the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management. We will carry out a number of webinars throughout this year. And by joining the partnership, you will also have direct access to this information to be able to participate in these webinars. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating today. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Have a
great
nice
day.
day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.